you spend a good portion of our lives asleep. So I hope that they help you get better sleep, these tips that I will be providing. We are going to start with a little bit of background on the anatomy of sleep, just a few slides on how the brain actually works in sleep, so that we know how we can make it better. Yes, yes. I'm going to bring myself down a little bit here. Go off to the side here just a little bit. So here we go. We're going to start here. This is your brain. In case you didn't recognize it, this is the thing inside your head. It's floating around inside your skull. As it says here, it is not purple, however. It is wrinkly, but it is not purple. Hello, Mr. Brain. Yes, indeed, Ivy. There is one inside you right now, just like there is a spooky skeleton waiting inside you, trying to get out. And I'm just going to touch on 2 or 3 little sections of your brain here that are important for our lesson. The first is the hypothalamus, the little bitty point here, but is still very important. The hypothalamus receives information about light. It comes directly from your eyes, which of course is part of why it's so hard to sleep when you are in the daytime, when it's light out. This little section of your brain helps to regulate your sleep cycle. I'm sure you know the term for it, but if anyone would like to shout it out, the term for your natural sleep cycle, your daily sleep rhythm. You could call the brain the electric jelly. That's true. It is a mass of wriggling tissue with electricity pumping through it. Yes, indeed, Bit. That is the answer. It is your circadian rhythm. That comes from the Latin roots circa, meaning around, and dia for day. It's how we manage our day around our sleep. This will become important a little bit later. The other important thing here is this big yellow banana thing, the brainstem. This is what communicates the transitions between waking and sleeping. What's important here to note is that it makes a chemical called GABA. You might have heard of this. You might have even taken it as a supplement for sleep. What it does is it reduces the activity of arousal centers. And no, class, it is not that kind of arousal. It is the parts of your brain that are awake and active. And this helps to get the muscles fully relaxed for sleep. I want to also mention the thalamus here. This little bulb in the very middle of your brain, deep inside. This is what sends information back and forth to the thinking part of your brain. So it shuts off during the deeper stages of sleep. Shuts off the thinking part of your brain. But in REM sleep, and we'll talk about that in a minute, it turns back on suddenly and lets your brain envision the sounds and sights and sensations in our dreams. And I'm sure you know what REM sleep means. Rapid eye movement. And the last thing I'll touch on before we get into the meat of it here is the pineal gland. You've probably heard of this little bulb here, again, deep in the brain. This is what signals the increase of melatonin. And melatonin and GABA, of course, we'll talk about supplementation, but the natural release is, of course, the best. And I just wanted to include this little strange-looking science diagram. They're always so strange when I see these in textbooks. Very odd. Oh, what a perfect song to come up for this. What is the name of this one again? Ah, yes, Under the Surface from DK64. Or Donkey Kong Country. Yes, yes. But now we're going to get into the very important stuff. Now we're going to get into the stages of sleep. There are 4 stages that you go through several times throughout each evening. And let me just bring this up over the rest of our overlay. There we are. During the first stage of sleep, which typically only lasts a few minutes for many people, you might have heard that the average person falls asleep in like 5 to 10 minutes. Now, I don't know what kind of person that is because I never fall asleep that quickly, but I guess that's the average. The first stage of sleep does only last a few minutes once you do get there. And it's easily interrupted, so it's very important that during this first stage, you avoid distractions, you keep light and sound to a minimum. Because if you get interrupted during this stage, you start the process all over again. During this stage, you start to slow your heart rate, your breathing, your muscles start to relax, and your brainwaves start to look like we see up here. You'll notice that they're not too different from the awake stage, just a little bit slower. And if you see Michael Scott down here, suddenly jolting awake, you probably recognize what that is. It's that strange jerking motion that happens when you jolt out of bed, when you're just starting to fall asleep. Have you ever had that happen? I'm sure you have. If you've ever felt that strange sensation where you jolt suddenly awake after you're just starting to fall asleep. Noah says that you figure a ton of people slip in and out of the first stage and don't know it, so they think they don't fall asleep in 10 minutes. That's very likely. Oh, Ivy, feeling like you're falling asleep, just not falling asleep. And Bit Shepherd, you do have the right notion. You're on the right track there. Hypnagogic, something or other. It is related to the term hypnagogic. It is called a hypnic jerk. Now, hypnic jerk is a type of myoclonic jerk, so it's actually related to hiccups. They're related to a similar thing, strangely enough. But what a hypnic jerk actually is when your muscles start to relax, and they start to relax a lot quicker than they normally do during the day. Your brain, in this sort of hypnagogic state, as it's transitioning from sleep to awake or awake to sleep, it senses that sudden relaxation in your muscles as if you're falling. And so your brain jolts you back awake because it thinks you're falling. Just like when you're in a dream and you start to fall and you jolt back awake in your bed. They're related to the same thing. It's perfectly normal, it's perfectly natural, it happens to most people. It's nothing to be worried about unless it happens very often and it's causing you some distress. Then you might want to talk to your doctor about it. But it happens to most people. The most important thing to take away from this first stage is just how easily it is to be interrupted. So if you want to get a good night's sleep, set yourself up for success by minimizing distractions and noise and light during this first stage. Do we have any questions about the first stage of sleep, this light stage as you first enter into sleep? Oh, you get them about once a month, Bit Shepherd? Yeah, I think that's about the same rate for me, every now and then. Let's head into stage 2. Stage 2 is the transition stage of sleep between the waking stage and the deeper sleep stage. I'm not going to talk about these sort of complicated looking graphs too much. But what you'll need to know about stage 2 is that you continue the slowdown process in your body, your heart rate and your breathing. Your eye movements start to completely stop moving. And in this stage, it is actually the stage you spend the longest amount of time in throughout the night. It's only about 10 to 30 minutes each cycle, but over the course of the night, you spend the most time here. And this is extremely important because this second stage is the one where some of the most important functions happen for your brain. Even though it's not a very deep stage, it's only stage 2, this is the stage where we really start to consolidate our memories and our learning, where we take everything we've experienced during the day and learned and heard, and we start to organize it, file it away like this little brain with a filing cabinet in it. You see in this brainwave graph that it starts to get much slower than it did in the first stage, with sudden jolts. And while we don't perfectly understand it all, these jolts, followed by little bits of activity, these spindles, is the brain organizing everything. It rests, then it thinks, and then it organizes and puts it all together for us. And I'll talk about why it's important that this takes about 10 to 30 minutes a little bit later. Do we have any questions about our second stage of sleep before we move on to the deep sleep of stage 3? Ivy, the SpongeBob empty your mind filing cabinet scene. Let me bring that one up actually.
What's his name? I got nothing on a name. Come on, baby, what's the name? We threw out his name!
Not a bad representation, actually. During this stage of sleep, you do start filing things away for easy recall later on. Oh, you love the theming? Thank you very much, Bit. I thought this might be a little bit more visually interesting than the typical slideshow. By all means, though, any comments you have, go ahead. We're just here for fun and to learn a little bit. Now we get into the deep sleep stage. This stage, where stage 2 is very important for our brain refreshing, this is where a lot of our physical repair happens. The muscles are totally relaxed, totally shut off. In fact, this is typically where the brain actually turns off the muscle control altogether. If you have ever experienced sleep paralysis, this is actually the stage that it happens in, because the brain is so relaxed and in such deep, slow brain waves. More consolidation in the brain happens, of course, but it is primarily a physical stage. And this one lasts about 20 to 40 minutes each cycle, but we'll see why later on it's not a stage you spend a lot of total time in each night. You can see the brainwave patterns here that you're in during deep sleep. Your brain is basically doing nothing at all. Like me most of the day, like my brain. Noma asks, when dolphins sleep, how deep do the sides of their brain go at a time? I think they go all the way. I don't know if they experience REM sleep. I don't know. They probably do dream, considering that they're one of the more intelligent animals. I know that primates, the other primates besides humans, do experience dreams and REM sleep. I'm not sure. That's a good question. Maybe we'll look that up later. But yes, getting enough sleep at this stage is critical if you want to feel refreshed physically from a full night of sleep. Once you're in this stage, if you get interrupted during this stage, you typically end up with a lot of grogginess. It's hard to be awakened when you're in this stage, but when you do, you typically get that groggy weariness and confusion that you do when you get woken up too early. So when you get woken up during the third stage, which can happen if you wake up a little bit too early, that's why. And now we get into the most fun part of sleep. Now we get into REM sleep. REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. This is the stage where, remember that thalamus we talked about earlier? It suddenly becomes active again. Oh yes, Bit Shepherd, I just saw that, yes. It is, third stage is the hate your alarm clock stage. If you fall asleep just a little too late, and you're still in stage 3 and aren't in REM sleep when you wake up, yep, that definitely will be the cause. During REM sleep, of course, stands for rapid eye movement. Whereas throughout the rest of the night, your eyes and your heart rate and your blood pressure are relatively low. REM sleep is actually a lot like the waking stage. It is the dream stage, Ivy. And it's because it's closer to the awakened stage that we have dreams. While the muscles are still immobile, the brain is much more like it is when it's awake. The first REM cycle during the evening is only about 10 minutes long, but you get longer and longer REM stages throughout the night until they last about 60 minutes, which is why you have your dreams, or the dreams you mostly remember, later on during the night, closer to when you're awake. And it typically takes about 90 minutes from falling asleep to get to the first REM stage. Oh no, but you actually can get alarms that detect the phase you're in to wake yourself up. I believe there are some apps that can connect to a smartwatch or a Fitbit type of watch, a Garmin, that type of thing, that it can be reading your heart rate and your blood pressure and sync your alarm to those stages so that it wakes you up during this REM light stage. And I'm going to move on so we can talk about why this is so important. This is the cycle as you see it here. During a full night of sleep, if you give yourself a full 7 to 9 hours, you'll get maybe 5 cycles full. What you'll notice is that first stage, that falling asleep stage into light sleep, it actually skips over the REM stage. Because the REM stage, even though it's closest to the awakened stage, you have to go through the full cycle first. You start off in that light sleep and you descend deeper and deeper and deeper into deep sleep. But then you come back up. You come back up through the light stages and into that first REM cycle. And then you go back down into deep sleep and back up through the light stages into REM sleep again, and it's a little bit longer. And again down in. And as you go through the night, your deep sleep cycles get shorter and shorter until you don't get them at all. So if you get a short period of sleep, you'll get a good amount of physical refreshing, physical repair, but you won't get quite as much of that brain work done. And then at the very end, typically you wake up during REM sleep, when it's at its longest point. So if you want to have dreams, if you're trying to remember your dreams, make sure that you're getting lots and lots of sleep. But let's talk about those dreams. Why do we dream? What happens during dreams? Why are they important? We don't know all the answers to those, but psychologically, we believe that it's involved in processing our emotions, working through them. It can also help us to tie our memories to certain emotions as the brain catalogs them away. And we found that people who have some kind of brain injury or brain issue where they can't dream, may experience trouble regulating their emotions or having stability in their emotions. So, however we came about having dreams, they've become very important. They also have physiological importance. I've seen the research refer to it as warming the circuits, which I don't fully understand what they mean by that, but... Oh, hello, Wreckin' Cat. Yes, let's all hydrate. We are, in fact, talking about our physical health. Make sure that you are staying hydrated. Hello, Wreckin' Cat. It's good to see you. We are just talking about dreams in our little lesson about sleep health and why dreams are actually quite important to us. They have both psychological and physiological importance to us. They help to build neural connections, connections between the emotions that we felt and the memories that we had when we felt those emotions. Dreams can also help us to assess and analyze our skills, catalog them away, connect them to the times and experiences that we need to use them, and to rehearse those skills and abilities. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, Ivy, that lots of memories can be odd. Yes, yes. Just like I am usually, you are ahead of the game. Why are our brains weird? Our brains are weird. Why are our dreams weird? Why are our dreams so surreal and strange sometimes? There is actually some research into why that is. During sleep, brain chemicals like dopamine are more prominent. We talked a little bit earlier about how the thalamus shuts on and off at different points during the evening. This affects the release of brain chemicals like dopamine and serotonin. We have more dopamine during sleep and less serotonin, which is suppressed. So we have more of the chemicals that are involved in imagination and less of the chemicals that are involved in anxiety and awareness. Not that dreams don't still produce some anxiety and can be scary, but we have less adrenaline and noradrenaline in our brains during dreams and during sleep, which may tie into why it's helpful for us in emotional regulation. Dreaming allows us to experience things without the accompanying physical stress chemicals. And I was just about to say, Bit Shepherd, sleeping on it. That phrase, I actually have it written down here. It's definitely real. We talked about in stage 2 how that particular brainwave pattern helps us to catalog things away, helps us to consolidate our learning, refreshes our brains. Sleep and dreaming helps our creativity. When someone suggests that you sleep on it, it's a good idea to take that advice. If you're presented with any decision, any choice that you need to make, and you have the time, sleep on it. You'll think more clearly about it usually. In fact, there have been studies where they have specifically prevented people from dreaming. They will interrupt them once they get into REM sleep. People who weren't allowed to dream during these studies experienced more tension and anxiety and more difficulty concentrating and decision making. Now, whether this study was very ethical or not, I would question. I think in most studies you are supposed to avoid doing any harm. So perhaps the ethics of these researchers was a bit dubious, but the research does exist. All in all, what it means is that our dreams are very important, not just for ourselves emotionally, but physically, psychologically, physiologically. If you do have problems with your dreams, if they're troubling, anxiety-inducing, they're persistent, that is something to bring up with a doctor because there are things that can be done to help ease those. In fact, there is a specific type of CBT called CBTI, CBT for insomnia, which can also help address troubling dreams. But let's get into one more little fun aspect of dreams. We've talked now about what dreams are, psychologically, physiologically, and we've talked about what the brain does during sleep, how it refreshes our brains and our minds during the second stage and refreshes our bodies during the third. Let's talk about what our dreams mean. Oh, Sarah, if you dreamed that you had gone on your BRB screen and were trying to entertain your chat in bed while you were trying to sleep, I think that's a performance-related dream. I think that's probably the brain doing that rehearsal that we were talking about. Running through your skills, even though it was probably not happening in the way you would have liked in the dream. And maybe it made you a little stressed. Your brain was probably doing some important work in working out and working through your own streaming adventure, your streaming skills. One of the other fun things about dreaming, of course, though, is interpretation. Can we interpret our dreams? One thing that I think for sure is that just even trying to interpret them, even trying to understand what they might mean, is helpful in itself. Even if you aren't able to find some scientific reason for it or supernatural reason for it, the fact that you are taking some time out of your day to reflect on what you dreamed about and trying to tie it to something that's happening in your life, you're thinking about that. You're taking some time to reflect quietly and thinking about the things that you're going through. Even if there isn't an actual tie between the dream and something that you're trying to work out during the waking hours, now you're thinking about that. Dream journals, Ivy, can indeed be good. They do help to train your brain to try to catalog, at least try to keep those dreams in memory. Noah says, you think life is a game and dreams are other games you're playing. That's an interesting thought. In each dream, the other dreams feel like dreams, while that one feels like reality. We heard you like dreams, so we put a dream in your dream so you can dream while you dream. Some other tips if you want to remember your dreams, of course, are remembering to remember. Reminding yourself, just before you go to sleep, that you want to remember your dreams. If it's something that is on your mind, in your brain, then there's a higher likelihood that you'll remember. Of course, as you probably do already, when you do wake up from a dream you want to remember, start quietly reflecting on it as soon as you can. And of course, reducing alcohol and reducing THC, reducing nicotine, those will certainly help you as well. Some people use some more advanced techniques to remember their dreams, like trying to remember specific symbols or specific visuals that they want to focus their minds on while they go to sleep. And then when they see that thing in their dream, they will be cued, they will be triggered to remember this is a dream. Maybe we'll talk about some of those more advanced techniques at a later time. But now we've talked about the anatomy of our brains and sleep. We've talked about the stages of sleep and how the second stage helps us remember and works out our brain, and the third stage works out our physical bodies, and how the fourth stage helps us psychologically and physiologically. And we've talked about dreams. Now we'll go into those tips. Now we'll talk about how we can get better sleep. What can you do to get better sleep? Well, the first thing you can do, of course, is be consistent. Go to sleep at the same time each day. I know people may have heard the misconception that humans are not actually naturally built for a 24-hour day, and so that makes us sort of off in our sleep schedule, but that's actually not really true. That hasn't really borne out in the research. We are actually very close to a 24-hour day for our natural circadian rhythm. We just typically don't do a very good job of sticking to that 24-hour schedule. But set specific times for your waking hours. Let your body's circadian rhythm do its job. Just don't get in the way. Of course, you'll want to also use your sleeping space just for sleep or for other intermittent activities. When your brain is primed to think of your bed as a second lounge where you sit and read and look at your phone and scroll on your laptop, and spend too much time on social media, something we'll talk about later, your brain doesn't see your bed as just a place for where you sleep. So keep your bed just a place where you sleep. Of course, I will always advocate for getting some daily physical activity. It doesn't even have to be strenuous or vigorous, but it will help you sleep better at night. Oh no, we found vitamin D helps you sleep better at night. I think there's something to that. I think there is some research behind that to help. Of course, you should be getting some daily sunlight. You want sunlight during the day to support your natural circadian rhythm. You want to be awake and active during the daylight hours. Of course, all of this will change if, say, you're on a third shift. That has its own whole host of issues. Something you might try is progressive muscle relaxation, like we did in that first hypnotherapy session. And we'll run through that again in a future stream this month. But progressive muscle relaxation is doing breathing practices, slow, even breathing, and progressively from your toes down to your head, flexing and contracting your muscles down to your toes, and then letting them relax. And then flexing and contracting in your calves and letting them relax. And then flexing and contracting your thighs all the way up until you get to the top of your head, progressively letting your muscles relax from toe to head, which makes it a lot easier to get through that first stage where your body is doing the muscle relaxation. The other main tip is that you want to set aside 20 to 30 minutes for a bedtime routine. Time away from your screen. Have an actual routine where you wash your hands, you brush your teeth, you do a little light stretching, you take a few moments to do some breathing practice, and then you lay down. Having a routine, having a set pattern of activities, connects that in your brain to sleep. You start doing those activities and your brain is already starting to say, oh, yes, I know what this is. This is sleep time. Some of the other things here you see on the left side. What can you do in your environment? Your body actually sleeps best in a temperature that's about 17 to 19 degrees Celsius or 62 to 67 degrees Fahrenheit. We actually tend to enjoy a slightly cooler environment where we can wrap ourselves up in a blanket. I'm sure you've experienced that at some point, where you would rather have the room a little cooler and then be able to wrap up in the blanket rather than having a warm room. I would also say you should clean your sheets and blankets and pillowcases regularly. I'll talk about this later in our stream about keeping yourself from getting sick and recovering better from being sick. And of course, keeping your sleeping area dark and quiet, of course. Like Usagi here, down in the bottom corner. Always sleeping peacefully. Yes, yes. Well, thank you so much for the contribution to our Self-Care December Goal Challenge, Seraph Dreams. Thank you. Comfy sleeps indeed, Ivy. Following these tips will lead to some much more comfortable sleep. But, of course, there are the things that we should not do. Of course, I'm sure you know not to drink too much alcohol, but there's a good reason why, beyond just the fact that it makes your sleep not as restful. Alcohol disrupts your melatonin release, and melatonin, as we know, helps to put your brain to sleep. Smoking is another avoid. It's a stimulant. Nicotine is a stimulant. It may make you feel relaxed on the inside, or at least what you think your body is feeling, but it is a stimulant. And even though I advocate exercise, of course, and you should get daily physical activity, exercising too close to bedtime can keep your muscles from being relaxed enough to fall asleep, and your brain will be a little bit more active. Because exercise is good for your mind, but just don't do it too close to when you're trying to sleep. You should also try to avoid too much spicy or acidic food. That can actually help you prevent from sleeping. We will be talking about caffeine, absolutely. In fact, I have a little advanced tip when I get to the napping section. You, of course, want to avoid using any of your blue light devices like your tablet or your phone or your laptop or your computer or your Nintendo Switch within a half hour of bedtime. Again, we talked about how the hypothalamus sees light and tells your brain it's still daytime. And of course, you don't want to take naps too close to bedtime or for too long during the day. And if you find yourself unable to fall asleep for more than 20 minutes, don't just lie there tossing and turning. You can't force yourself into it. Get up, but be relaxed. Sit down, do a quiet activity like reading, maybe listen to some relaxing music. But it's not going to help too much if you just lie there tossing and turning. Or stare at your phone, or stare at your clock, and watch the minutes go by and think, well, if I fall asleep right now, I can still get 6 hours of sleep. Well, that's not actually going to help you very much. Ivy, that's a great suggestion you have there. When you can't sleep, you sometimes use it to organize things or clean something. Not only are you getting something done, but that does tend to help your mind relax. You're taking your focus off of not being able to sleep and putting it into something like organizing. I think that's a good suggestion. And I have this here blank. What can help? Because I want to hear what are some of the things that you do to help yourself fall asleep first. We heard Noma mention that vitamin D helps, and I think that there's some research behind that. It does help. Possibly because it is related to sunlight. What are some things that you do or think that helps you when you can't fall asleep or when you need help sleeping? We've talked about some of the things already, some of the things that you can take or that a lot of people take to help them sleep. I think the first thing we can mention, of course, is melatonin. Oh yes, Ivy, talking about doing the meditation where you flex all of your muscles one at a time. It's a very good one. Noma is about to be moved down to the monkey wrench tier. Almost Pirate, counting ye old sheep. Bit Shepherd, you stared at the sun with your eyes closed for a while during the break because of seasonal affective disorder. I see. Was that something that was suggested to you? But yes, melatonin supplementation can help. There certainly is some good science behind it. Of course, you want to try and increase your natural production of melatonin. But if you can't get it yourself, you can certainly get store-bought. Because it also has some good evidence that it's helpful for chronic pain. Maybe that's just because of getting better sleep with it. But you do want to make sure that you're following the suggested dosage and not taking it into your own hands for how much you should take. You want to get just about 1 to 5 milligrams about a half hour before bed. So it takes about a half hour to start working. But there are a lot of people now who are taking way too much melatonin. You don't want to take any more than 10 milligrams at a time. I know a lot of parents are giving their kids melatonin now, like melatonin gummies to get them to fall asleep. That concerns me a little bit as someone who teaches. I don't think we want to be dosing kids to get them to sleep. I know that it isn't anything new. Parents would give their kids NyQuil to get them to settle down and fall asleep, but it may make your job as a parent a little easier in the short term, but probably not good for the child. The other thing I wanted to mention, of course, we talked about GABA. GABA helps the muscles to relax. It hasn't gotten nearly as much study as melatonin, But GABA has more than just an effect on sleep. It can also help improve mood. And because it helps the muscles relax, it may also help our muscles recover from exercise. So if you are having some trouble sleeping, GABA might be something that will help. I think that's an interesting point, Noma. Melatonin is a hormone. It is a brain hormone. Parents being weirded out about giving their kids those very powerful brain hormones, actually. The other thing that I'm surprised no one brought up is tea. Lavender tea, valerian root tea. Have you ever tried using those to help your sleep? I'm curious. I don't usually drink much tea. Have you tried using those calming teas like lavender or valerian root? Oh, Ivy, peppermint tea relaxes you. Huh. I haven't heard about that one being used for relaxation as much. Let's see. Let's look that up. I see. One study found that 3 drops of peppermint oil per day did help improve people's sleep quality if they were suffering from a physical ailment. That's interesting. There does seem to be some science for it. Of course, I'm not reading the full studies as we're talking, but there does seem to be some studies about it. Not quite as many as for lavender, of course. Lavender has been used for a very long time in a whole host of ways, whether it's aromatherapy or tea. And I should point out, there is some criticism of aromatherapy, and some people say that it's hokum. It's actually not. There is something to it. It's not as pronounced or prominent as people might want to believe it is, but if someone suggests aromatherapy to you, don't just dismiss it out of hand. You might want to look up and see if it does have some validity to it. Oh, chamomile. That was the other one I wanted to mention. I hear people use chamomile tea all the time to help sleep. That's one I'm interested in as well. I should give that one a look. Herbal Essences Sleepy Time Tea. That's right, Ivy. Get yourself some Sleepy Time tea. Get yourself the tea box with the sleepy little bear on it. Celestial seasoning. Just look at that comfy sleeping bear. I wish that was me. Oh no, you think chamomile tea tastes like sleepy candy corn? Well, I can't say I'm much of a fan of candy corn. Now that we've talked about some of these suggestions, I will put them in our little What Can Help section. And when we're done, I will actually post all of these slides in our Discord and on the Twitter, so that everyone can have them if you'd like. And it will include this infographic that has most of the information we've talked about, if you want a simpler, shorter form that can be shared. So class, let's talk about one last topic, one that I think is very important and helpful. Let's talk about naps. Let's talk about taking naps. Naps are not bad. I know people think, well, it'll hurt my sleep. It doesn't have to. It doesn't have to hurt your nightly sleep to get a good nap. There's pretty good research, pretty good studies out there about how a daytime nap, if it's short, can help improve your mood and memory throughout the day. Help you relax, keep your stress and mood down. Exactly, Ivy. A siesta. Many places around the world have been having just it's a part of their whole day is planned into their daily routines. What I do want to suggest is that your timing of your naps is very important. You can get a lot of good benefit out of a nap if you do it right. And now that we've talked about the sleep stages, we know why. So class, can someone tell me why I have this here that about 30 minutes is optimal? Why is a 30-minute nap the optimal amount of time to take a nap for? Thinking about what we talked about in the sleep stages. There you go, Seraph. You hit it right on the head. So you don't get into too deep of a sleep. Exactly, Ivy. You want to get your nap done before you start getting into those deep stages. Everyone got it. Everyone got it right. You remembered. You were paying attention. You don't know how good that makes a teacher feel to see that the students were actually paying attention to the lesson. You want to get... Thank you for the gold stars. Yes, indeed, Bit Shepherd. You want to get that first round of refreshing stage 2 sleep, that brain refresh, but you don't want to start getting into that third stage where your body is really relaxed, because then you'll be woke up and you'll be groggy and your brain will be a little fuzzy rather than feeling refreshed. However, if you do need a longer nap, aim for about 90 minutes. This one's a little harder. Why would you go for a 90-minute nap if you need a longer nap? Thinking about our sleep stages. I'll give you some time to think about it. I can go back and bring up the graph if you'd like. In fact, let's go bring that graph back up. The question is, why would you want your longer nap to be about 90 minutes? I think, Bit, you got it there, because then you complete one cycle. You wake up here in this first REM stage area. Exactly, Ivy. You get to go all the way into that third stage. You don't want to wake up during it, longer than a half hour. But if you get the full 90 minutes, you'll get a full cycle. You'll get a full period of time in that relaxing, restful, physical part of the sleep here, and a full cycle here of the second stage. And you'll wake up closer to here in the light sleep. Waking up when you're in a light stage or in REM sleep is going to be a lot easier to get yourself back going into the day than waking up deeper into these sections. Very good actually. So our other tips for napping, you of course don't want to nap too close to bedtime. So you want to nap, let's say if you have a normal sleep time at about 11, you don't want to nap after say 3 o'clock. That perfect siesta time like Ivy talked about, during about the lunchtime period, when having a nice lunch might make you feel sleepy anyways. Of course, you want to follow some of the same things you do for your full regular night's sleep. Making sure that you are in a dark, cool environment. Making sure you set that alarm for about 30 minutes or 90 minutes. Now, I did mention that there was one advanced napping technique, or maybe I just mentioned about the caffeine part that Seraph brought up. Caffeine takes about a half hour to start metabolizing into your system. and it takes usually 30 to 45 to 60 minutes to fully be into your system. So some people have found success taking their mid-afternoon, afternoon coffee or a little bit of an energy drink right before they take a nap, because then they wake up after their alarm goes off 30 minutes later. The caffeine starts going through their system. They've got that little refreshment of their brain from one set of light and stage 2 sleep. And it's a real power nap. Now, I know some people, especially in the health world, will say you need to cut out all caffeine, or they don't like that particular tip. I don't think that you need to go all the way and say, don't drink any caffeine. And I'm certainly not here to tell you never drink alcohol or don't smoke. You shouldn't smoke, but you should reduce it. And you don't need to cut out caffeine altogether. Just use it when you need it, and rather than making it something you have to have every day. But that's a power nap tip. A little bit of caffeine right before you take that 30-minute nap. And thank you so much for bringing that up, Noma. That's an excellent point. I'm so glad I have people here to help me remember these things. You should definitely do this with a little bit of food in your stomach. And that connects with the siesta part. It connects with the drowsiness you have after a nice lunch. Your stomach is full, you're feeling a little sleepy, have a little bit of caffeine. The food helps it to slow down in its metabolization process. You wake up after that 30 minutes and feel a lot better. You've digested some of the food. The caffeine is just starting to run through you. So, that is our lesson in sleep. Class, that's what I have for you. Do you have any questions? Is there anything more that you would like to talk about specifically? Do you have any further tips or things that you found keep you from sleeping or help you sleep better?